Burkina Faso just detonated a bombshell at the United Nations. Minister Bazié, sent by Traoré, delivered explosive revelations worldwide. We're breaking down the key moments, terror, crisis, and alliances. But here's the real question. Will these revelations spark change or ignite conflict? Overview of Bassoma Bazié's United Nations address. Today, we're breaking down a significant moment at the United Nations General Assembly. It's all about Bassoma Bazié, the Minister of State of Burkina Faso, and a message he delivered that had real weight behind it. Now, Bazié wasn't just randomly selected for this gig. He was sent specifically by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, currently leading Burkina Faso's transitional government. That's key because it tells you this wasn't just some routine diplomatic speech. This was a deliberate act, a way for Burkina Faso to communicate directly with the world. Think of Bazié as Traoré's envoy, carrying a message that Burkina Faso wanted to make sure everyone heard loud and clear. So, what did he say? Well, Bazié's speech covered a lot of ground. He wasn't shy about calling out what he sees as injustices in the world, and he laid out an evident vision for where Burkina Faso wants to go. It covered sovereignty, security, and the future of the Sahel region. To give you a quick rundown, some of the major points he made included a strong critique of imperialism disguised as terrorism, the affirmation of Burkina Faso's right to partner with any country it chooses without external interference, the highlighting of what he sees as hypocrisy, and the need for significant reforms within the United Nations, specifically addressing Africa's lack of representation on the Security Council. Those are the main things you need to know. Ibrahim Traoré's message to the world. Now, let's unpack that a bit further. What was the deeper meaning behind Ibrahim Traoré sending Bazié to the United Nations? What message was he trying to convey to the global community? This is more than just about delivering prepared remarks. It was a calculated strategic move. It boils down to a few key things. First, perhaps most importantly, it was about asserting Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Traoré wanted to signal that Burkina Faso is in control of its destiny and will not be dictated to by outside powers. He wanted to make it known that Burkina Faso is free to make its own decisions, choose its allies, and chart its course. Second, it was a challenge to the status quo. By criticizing established powers and international institutions, Traoré was signaling that Burkina Faso is not content with the traditional power dynamics in global politics. It's a way of saying, we're not going to just sit here and accept things as they are. We want to see real change. Third, it was an invitation to forge new partnerships. Traoré was letting the world know that Burkina Faso is open to working with countries that respect its sovereignty and are willing to support its development goals. However, those who do not fit the description need not apply. It was also about bringing international attention to the security and humanitarian challenges facing Burkina Faso and the broader Sahel region. By using the United Nations platform, Traoré aimed to raise awareness of these issues and to mobilize support for the country's efforts to address them. Condemnation of terrorist attacks. One of the most prominent aspects of Bazié's speech was his condemnation of the terrorist attacks that have been plaguing Burkina Faso. He spoke passionately about the toll that this violence is taking on his country, both in terms of human lives and overall stability. Bazié was also critical of what he saw as hypocrisy within the international community. He pointed to what he believes are double standards and asked why those in Burkina Faso are not being looked at in the same light as in other parts of the world. He was saying that Burkina Faso deserves the same level of support and attention as any other country facing a similar threat. He also didn't hold back in criticizing the role of external actors in the Sahel region, particularly France, suggesting that their interventions haven't always been helpful and have sometimes even made the situation worse. He also referenced the United Nations Security Council's condemnation of these attacks, particularly the one in Barcelona, underscoring the international community's concern over the escalating violence. All of this is tied into Bazié's belief that violence is being imposed from the outside. Ultimately, Bazié was calling for a more effective and more equitable approach to combating terrorism in the Sahel. He was saying that Burkina Faso needs genuine support, not empty promises or self-serving interventions. A nation on the brink, and now, we need to address the absolutely devastating humanitarian crisis that has engulfed Burkina Faso. This is not just a statistic. This is about real people. And it's important that the world understands what's happening on the ground. Let's talk about the actual situation. Over 2 million people have been internally displaced. Think of having to pack up your life and leave everything behind, with no guarantee of safety or security. That's the reality for millions of Burkinabés. That, on its own, is reason enough to be concerned. The challenges are not just limited to the number of people displaced, but also those in need of assistance. Getting that aid to people who need it is not easy. Many humanitarian organizations face challenges daily and simply cannot get things done. Bazier made it clear that Burkina Faso cannot cope with this crisis on its own. He appealed to the international community for assistance, urging them to step up and provide the necessary resources to help the country address the humanitarian crisis. He's asking for the world to acknowledge the suffering of the Burkinabe people and to provide meaningful support to help them rebuild their lives. Burkina Faso's stance on international cooperation. Let's examine Burkina Faso's stance on international cooperation, particularly in relation to its relationships with bodies like ECOWAS. And let's be clear, things have shifted. A key turning point has been the decision by Burkina Faso, along with Mali and Niger, to withdraw from ECOWAS. This was a significant move, with the intent of calling out ECOWAS and their handling of regional security and development. It's a clear statement that Burkina Faso feels its needs and concerns haven't been adequately addressed by the regional body. Bazier also said that ECOWAS is not living up to its mission. It also does not adequately represent the people and their best interests. He said this has led to the country needing to focus on what its goals are. There's not a cut and dry outcome for what it wants to achieve, or how. But Burkina Faso is looking to make partnerships with those that are aligned. There is also interest in diversifying its partnerships. By doing this, Burkina Faso seeks to create mutually beneficial partnerships and ensure a more balanced approach to international relations. This reflects a broader trend in the region, with countries looking to establish more diverse and equitable relationships with international actors. It's a move towards greater self-reliance and a desire to shape their destinies. A new power block? Now talk about a potentially game-changing development in the Sahel, the Confederation of the Sahel States, or CSS. This is a treaty signed by Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, and it's a mutual defense pact. Now, what does this mean for the region and beyond? Well, on the surface, it's about these three countries banding together to face common threats, particularly the ongoing terrorist insurgency. They're saying, we're stronger together, and pledge to support each other in case of attack or aggression. But there's more to it than just that. This confederation is also a political statement. It's a signal that these countries are increasingly aligned in their views and are willing to challenge the existing regional and international order. Remember, all three of these nations are currently led by military juntas that came to power through coups. They share a certain anti-establishment sentiment, and they've all been pushing back against what they see as external interference in their affairs. This confederation isn't just about boots on the ground, but also economic cooperation. The member states hope to promote trade, investment, and infrastructure development within the CSS. This could involve harmonizing regulations, building new transportation links, and creating a more integrated market. The long-term goal could be to create a single economic zone within the Sahel. However, the success of these economic initiatives will depend on overcoming the region's many challenges, including insecurity, political instability, and a lack of resources. A double threat. Here's a harsh reality. Civilians in Burkina Faso are caught in the crossfire between Islamist armed groups and the state security forces. Both sides have been accused of committing serious human rights abuses, and the number of civilian deaths has been alarmingly high. The Human Rights Watch report that led to the latest media suspensions documented at least 223 civilian massacres by Burkina Faso's army in February 2024. Similar massacres have been reported by other rights and media organizations. Under Traoré's junta, civilian deaths at the hands of security forces increased from 430 in 2022 to 735 in 2023. According to figures from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, it's important to remember these numbers represent real people. The government has blamed terrorist groups for the attacks that have plagued the area, and the military junta is using media crackdowns to cover up human rights abuses committed by the army in its counter-terrorism operations. This is a very serious crime because it is an effort to silence the truth. This cycle of violence and impunity is devastating for the people of Burkina Faso. They're facing threats from all sides. And there's little accountability for those who commit abuse. There needs to be transparency in these situations so that the right groups can help provide the right assistance. A deadly landscape. Another critical issue that often gets overlooked is the widespread explosive threat in Burkina Faso. This is a country contaminated with landmines, improvised explosive devices, and other unexploded ordnance. And that's a recipe for disaster. These explosives pose a serious threat to civilians, especially in conflict-affected areas. People are getting injured, killed, and displaced because of these deadly devices. What's worse, the explosive threat affects 11 out of 13 regions of Burkina Faso. That means most of the country is living under this constant danger. This explosive contamination also hampers humanitarian efforts and development work. It makes it difficult to deliver aid, access farmland, and rebuild communities. It's a major obstacle to recovery and stability. The government's priority is to remove the explosive threats, but they can't be everywhere at once. Justice delayed, justice denied. Finally, let's talk about accountability, or rather, the lack of it. One of the most troubling aspects of the situation in Burkina Faso is the lack of progress in investigating conflict-related atrocities and holding those responsible to account. There have been numerous reports of abuses committed by both Islamist armed groups and state security forces, but very few of these cases have been properly investigated. There's a culture of impunity, where perpetrators feel like they can get away with anything. Unfortunately, this creates an environment of fear, instability, and a lack of resolution for those involved. A robust and impartial judicial system is an important aspect to make sure everything is handled correctly and according to process. Transparency is key, and this will ensure justice. The Burkina Faso government has a responsibility to ensure that those accused of crimes are brought to justice in a fair and transparent manner. This lack of accountability is not only a betrayal of the victims, it also fuels further violence and instability. It sends a message that human rights don't matter, and that there are no consequences for wrongdoing. And that's why so many international organizations are working to push for the government to deliver on its promises. Ultimately, Bassole Mbazie's address at the United Nations General Assembly was a bold and assertive statement of Burkina Faso's vision for itself and its place in the world. It was a message of sovereignty, independence, and defiance. But it was also a plea for understanding, support, and partnership. Whether the international community will heed that message remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: Burkina Faso is determined to chart its course, regardless of what others may think. So, was that United Nations speech by Burkina Faso's Minister Bazié a brave move or a reckless one? Did he drop truth bombs that needed to be heard, or burn bridges unnecessarily? Drop your thoughts into the comments. If you find this video helpful, hit that like button, subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching.